Okay, this is Mike Soares of Soares Tenor Guitars. Today we're going to talk about wiring a pickguard or guitar basics. First thing I want to say is if you're rewiring or getting a new pickguard or making a custom guitar, these pots, they run some 1 meg ohm on the older guitars, but mostly everything today is 250 meg or 500 ohms on here. But if you notice here, you have different size pots. You have a short thread and a long thread. The long threads are basically used for archtop guitars or guitars where you're bringing the pot through the wood of the guitar, like a custom Les Paul or something like that, a solid body where you've made the cavity underneath with the router, and you can just have the you're not going to have a pick guard. These shorter ones are made to go into your standard pick guards. So just so you make sure you get the right pots. If for any reason you order the wrong pots, you can always use washers to build this up, or get another bolt to go on here other than the one that comes with it, and set the bolt height up or down to fit the height that you need. Same thing on a if you're doing a archtop guitar, you can always have a bolt underneath without the washer and set this so you can set your thickness so your control knobs are not too high off the top of the guitar, as they can sometimes break off. This is our basic Stratocaster setup. This has already been all soldered up. We didn't do the jack yet. That gets done after the guitar is the pickguard is mounted to the guitar. Another thing I want to talk about is, I'm going to call it a pigtail. We make a pigtail, positive and negative, with alligator clips and a standard 1/4 inch guitar jack. We use this to test everything as we go. The first thing we do is we test all our pickups before we put them into our pickguard. We want to make sure that all our pickups work first. Okay, and what we do with this here, you plug it into your amp, you plug your pigtail into your amp, you hook up your pickup, your negative and your positive, you take a basic screwdriver and you tap the poles to see if you get a good tone. Okay, and that tells you whether or not your pickup is working. You don't want to install a bad pickup and have it drive you crazy later because you're not getting sound out of that pickup or any sound at all. The first thing you want to do is check your pickups, make sure they work straight into the amp. The next thing we do here is, we know the pickups are working. We like to use these little ties, keep the wiring in place and bring it around. In this case, this is a Stratocaster Chinese style selector switch. This is your bottom pickup, this is your middle pickup, this is your upper pickup, and this is going into your volume control. Okay, and another thing I want to talk to you about, going back to the pots, the tone and volume pots. I like to clean these out first. Usually when you get them new, you'll feel they're kind of stiff. Sometimes not, but you'll feel a little drag on them, and you don't want to get any crinkling sound, a crunching sound. So what we do is we clean our switch and our pots with a mass air cleaner. We get this at the automotive store. This is CRC, mass air cleaner, sensor cleaner for cars. We use that to clean off our electronics, our switch and our pots. We spray it inside and we spray it on the shaft. We turn the shaft a couple of times after it's been sprayed, and you'll feel it'll loosen right up nicely. Okay, if for any reason you get the pots that have this little nub on them, this is made for some guitars, has a little secondary hole where this locks in. If you don't want to use that and you don't want to drill the secondary thing, you just take a pair of pliers and you knock that little nib off of there. Okay, so we've tested our pickups, they're working. We cleaned our switch, put that in. We've cleaned our pots and we've installed those. And then what we do is, the first thing, I have this all wired up basically right now, but first thing you want to do is you're going to hook up your 3 pickups to your switch, run your switch into your volume control. Don't worry about the tone right now, we're not concerned with the tone. Onto the volume, we have the first lug is coming off of the middle of the switch. The next lug is the positive going into your jack, and then the lug after that is your ground. The ground is running through the last lug, and that runs up to the pot. Okay, and this wire slipped out a little bit. I'm going to move this up to go onto the copper wire here. Okay, and this is all going to get soldered up here. Okay, again, forget about the tone for now. So what I want to talk to you about, a lot of these Chinese made switches, especially this type here, which is made in a lot of Les Paul style guitars. This is a 3-way switch, upper, middle, and bottom. These tend to melt very quickly if you solder them. You have to be very careful with this kind of switch. And also these here, they're not as good as the old switches were. So what we like to do is we take our soldering iron. Let me just give you a little tip on the wiring. What we like to do on our wiring is, sometimes your wires are pre-soldered on the end. We like to take a little bit of solder off. We like to use a good pair of strippers, bring it slightly off of the wire. Don't pull it off all the way. If it pulls off all the way, it's okay. But what you want to do is just turn the extra plastic here and get a good winding on your wire. This will make your wire stronger and you won't have those hairs sticking out of the wires. And then the end, you'll see the end is not particularly straight. It's got little things that when you put the wire in can make the wire split off again. We take a scissor, snip that off straight, and in this case I like to go underneath with the like the switcher. Bring this up, over and around. We use a fine needle nose plier to wrap the wire around the post. Another thing we like to do is lightly sand our posts. The posts are usually silver plated. They can get oxidized, so you get a good solder connection. You want to clean off your post with a little sandpaper, or you can use a file, and that'll give you a good soldering job. And this here is, I believe this is a 30 watt or 40 watt soldering gun. What we do here is we pull the trigger on the gun, we heat the soldering iron up off of the prong here, the tab. And what we do is we melt a little bit of solder, get a little ball going on the end of the soldering iron, and touch that down to the lug. And you'll see it'll stick nicely to the lug because we cleaned the lug off. Now we're going to go to the next one. On this here, we're going to pull the wire down a little bit out of the way. And we're just going to dab the solder onto the lug. Make sure it closes the hole up on the lug. And we're going to go to the next wire. Now we have all our 3 pickups. We pull on the wire a little bit to keep it in place, make sure it doesn't move. Now here I'm showing the yellow wire is moving, because we didn't get a good connection on that. So we're going to go back, get a little more solder, let that cool down, and we're going to check that. Okay, we got a good connection on that yellow wire. Okay, What happens is if you hold this down on the lug and put the solder, you wind up melting your wire, and you don't want to do that. Okay, now this is the wire going to our volume control, which goes across the two centers of the switch. Again, we're going to get some solder, dab it on there. And that's basically it. You want to do that on all your connections. Again, dab the solder onto the end of the soldering iron, and then bring it down onto your wire so you don't heat up the wire too much. Okay, then after that, after we get it all wired up, your 3 pickups are wired up, your volume control is wired up. Okay, you got all your soldering, your lugs soldered there. We have an extra wire. This is the wire for the jack. Okay, we're going to strip this back. Now this is usually the most common place where you're going to have a problem. You have these very fine hairs on the ground, on the shielded cable here going to your jack. You want to make sure you get all those little hairs, and again twist them up. Use a scissor to cut off the end so your end is nice and flush. Do the same thing on your hot lead here. Strip your wire back. Okay, I didn't need the plastic on that time, but you could do it by hand too. You want to get a good twist on your wire, and you want to cut off the end nice and flush. This way when you put it in through the hole of the jack, you don't get this fraying. And you're going to wrap that around. Okay, solder your jack. Now you're going to test your switch with your volume. You're going to plug this into your, you're going to hook a plug up onto this here, plug it into your amp. You don't have to solder this at this time, just make sure you get a nice twist on it. And check your switch. And you're going to check your volume. Okay, turn your volume back and forth, see if you get good different, again by tapping each pickup. And what you want to do on this here is once you've got your volume set up and everything's fine, then you go to your tone control. You go and you wire your tone control. We like to use a .47 tone cap instead of a .22. Gives you a nicer bottom end, especially because we make tenors, and the bottom end is a little more needed. And what we also do here is on our pots, we take a file and we file down a spot on the back of the pot, here, so that when you add your solder and you solder to the pot, you get a nice connection. The solder will flow. Again, we like to, here you can put a little more heat, but we like to put the solder on the soldering iron first, then apply it to the part that we need. That's basically it. Then you test your tone control, see if that works. The idea is if you have a bad pickup, you find out beforehand. If there's a problem with the switch, you're going to find out beforehand. Then your tone, and then your volume rather, and then your tone control. This way, if there's a problem, you have an idea of where to look for the problem. A lot of this stuff is made in China, and I have had a lot of pots that were bad. I very rarely get a bad pickup. I would say in 40 years, I've had 3 pickups that were bad. I had a set of lace pickups that were very high end that were bad, and I do get a bad pickup now and then. Sometimes the switches are bad, and the volume and tone, usually they work. Sometimes ones are much noisier than others. If it's really noisy, I'll yank it out and put another one in. After you do all your soldering, you want to go back and just move your wires around a little bit and just check that number one, they're not moving around inside the lugs, and that they're not any wires going and crossing in between that could cause a short. Again, this is Mike Soares. It's Racy Tenor Guitars. Thank you.